So welcome back, everybody. This is Night Flight, and today we are going to talk to Howdie Mickoski, and we are going to talk about the afterlife and how to navigate it. I thought that is a subject that is always interesting. I'm very happy to have him here. So, Howdie, welcome to Night Flight.
Yeah, hi Judith, thanks. And you are probably one of the first people who've said my last name correctly. Uh, yeah, so it must be something of being so close to being in Central Europe. You've seen the name before.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a lot of keys here.
Yeah, yeah. So
So, my first question is always when I have a new guest, yeah, what sparked your interest in that? I saw you, what was that? The email address or maybe the name of your channel, Egypt Howdie. So is it correct when I assume that the Book of the Dead, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, had something to do with it?
yes and no. I started this work, I guess you would call it. I don't know what you want to call this dive into testing reality. About 30 years ago, I'd gone through a number of extremely traumatic events, and I was at the point of pretty much getting ready to kill myself. And I just couldn't come up with a really good way to do it that would be, not messy for people, the ones finding this body. And at that time, a program came on. It was on my birthday on Egyptian pyramid building. And I pretty much knew right away that that's what I needed to study, that there was wisdom in ancient Egypt and I needed to study that. And that took me about 10 years. And I went through a combination of alchemy and hermeticism, and then was lucky enough to meet a Korean monk, spent a year with him, some time with several native medicine men on their reserves in Canada. And during that time, I was mostly testing reality. So I was testing the solidity, the actual how real reality is. And of course, it failed every time I tested it. And then I wrote that book called Power of Then about 2004, 2005, thinking I knew quite a bit about this world. Then I had a death experience in 2005. I slipped into a river next to a waterfall. And in that death experience, I realized a major mistake that I had made about reality, that I realized I've known up to that point, reality was not true, it was fake, but I was still real. And in the death experience, I realized, oh, right, I'm as fake as reality. I'm not real either. So that took about 10 years of challenging experiences of integrating that and dealing with the many. We can get into that if you want, all the strangeness around that as well. That became Falling for Truth. That came out about 4 or 5 years ago. In 2019, then I got drawn into writing about the world's fairs. So I wrote about the very strange expositions of the 1800s that came out of studying cathedrals in Florence. And in the course of studying the cathedrals as machines, not as religious devices, then I was drawn into these bizarre buildings of the World Fair. Um, so that's what I was talking about during the first few years of this insane 3 year experience we've had. And in the middle of it, I was talking a lot about Plato's cave, and I was talking a lot about beginning to talk again of a lot of the things I spent time with the monks with, and with the native medicine men. And they said, well, maybe I should write a book on Plato's cave. And as I began working on that last May, I started to realize that the allegory of Plato's cave, of exiting the cave, exiting the matrix, is a very poor allegory. And it forced me to go into an unbelievable amount of depth into looking at, again, what this reality is, what it isn't. Simple answer, I moved more to almost like a Gnostic or Cathar view of this reality. And I'm more than happy to share that with you, and of course share. And for those who are going to be listening the rest of this interview now, we should warn you that what I'm going to say is my own opinion. It's my own thesis after 30 years of work. It doesn't mean you should believe what I have to say, but you shouldn't reject it either. This is going to be potentially very challenging and very harsh material for your egoic mind. But if you're looking for what's true, if you're really looking for who and what you are, who and what this reality actually is, then we have to break through the barriers and the walls of sort of the foundation of lies that we've built up in our whole existence. And only by breaking those down can we see what's behind it. So things might sound negative in what I say at the beginning, but it really leads to something quite positive, which is the eventual finding out of who and what you actually are.
Hmm. So in my oh, I have an echo. Do you hear that as well? No? Okay. Yeah. Maybe it was a glitch. Doesn't matter. In my personal circles, I know quite a few people that actually believe, okay, when you die, lights out, and then, yeah, nothing. Yeah, it goes dark, and then I guess you go into a state of non-existence, and that's it. So for people that are wired like that, what kind of evidence do we have that there is an afterlife?
Well, so I've got two things, I guess, to share first. So the first is how I see this reality, and then we
Mm-hmm.
can talk about then how I see what
Okay.
is the other side of this. So this normally people are presented this reality. We get this from a very young child. We are presented that this reality was created by a loving God who cares about us, who has made this place, this wonderful place for us to live and grow as a school so we can learn. We get a few challenges, but they are built by God for us so that we can become perfect and rejoin this perfect world in this heavenly afterlife. That's the standard presentation that we're given. And like I said, I've now come to see this place the way a Gnostic or Cathar would, in that I see this instead as a creation of an evil deity, an insane evil deity, known as the demiurge to Gnostics, or Rex Mundi as the Cathars, who've built this world not as a school, not as a place to help anything at all, but as a place where us divine sparks have been tricked into coming in here and are used to create a suffering pit of hell in order that we can be constantly used as an energy source to drive the simulation. I see it as a non-real reality, as a simulation which has been built to trap divine sparks within it. What we would call an afterlife is then just another gigantic simulation designed to trick us to keep coming back into further elements of the simulation. And that doesn't mean I don't think there's something that is true, or fully believe there's something that's fully true, but it's not within Plato's cave. It's not within the matrix. So when we talk about the matrix, I don't just mean this material reality. I mean the etheric realm, the astral realm, the super duper realm, the angel realm, the nirvana, all of it. It's all a part of Plato's cave. It's just differing layers of suffering, differing layers of weirdness, differing layers of traps. And the great journey, I think, for me is to, of course, navigate all of those things the way some ancients attempted to describe it. So, finally, to answer your question. So, for those who might say that idea of like nothing happens in the afterlife, we have to, I think, look at two really interesting pieces of information. One would be the tens of thousands of near-death experiences that have been related to us. Now, I have, of course, as you know, I have a lot of problems with what a near-death experience is, why it's presented the way it is, why it's presented so commonly in the same way. But we have these experiences that are indicating something is going on within our conscious and within our awareness during this transformative moment. The other is young children who are reviewing and able to present other lives with such perfection that literally they can go and see old family members and give them details that there's no way a 4-year-old child should possibly know, which indicates some form of recycling, some form of reincarnation is actually happening in this realm. And that indicates, well, if we're seeing that reincarnation is a real thing, well, why don't we remember any of it? And that, of course, leads, and going back into my thesis, as to why this is a giant wheel, a giant trap for our souls.
Yeah. So when people have a near-death experience, yes, you are correct. They have a lot of things in common. Yeah, a light, um, people that are showing up, that their loved ones or their favorite dog or whatever it
Mhm.
is. And but then again, there are also people that say, yeah, that's all correct. But the thing is, when you have a near-death experience, you are not really tethered from your body. You are still, there is still a connection. So how much, yeah, should we trust those experiences?
Right. So the standard near-death experience, and there's some great places out there for people who are interested in looking into them. There's like 5 or 6 or 10 YouTube channels with lots of people. There's another one called, I think it's NDERF.org, something like that, which lists like thousand or no thousands of people's near-death experiences. So about 85 to 90% are similar to what you've listed there. White light, dead grandma, Jesus, life review, feeling of love, um, told it's not your time. That's 80 to 90%. But there are these 10% that are not anything like that at all. And in fact, the other 10%, I think, reveal such incredible depth of what might really be going on, and are the ones that I think we should really need to focus on. What's going on in the ones that are not the standard experience? And generally, those non-standard experiences get ignored by the researchers and by the book writers because it destroys their thesis of God loves you, grandma's waiting for you, it's going to be wonderful. Don't think about this stuff. I now see the standard near-death experience. I call it like going to the dentist, but only having to sit in the waiting room. You
Yeah.
sat in the waiting room. It's not bad, not been too bad. Then the dentist comes in and says, "Sorry, we're a little busy today. You'll have to come back tomorrow." Oh, okay. And then you go, as opposed to a few people who've actually gone in and sat in the dentist chair, and they have a very different experience of what that is. So I think what we've got is, and this is just my opinion, this is just my theory, but if the white light is the recycling device, as we've been told, that by going to the white light, it's the final decision you've made, that in a sense you're coming back, you're recycling into this insane reality, then if you are the one in charge of that system, you would want to make the white light seem as wonderful as possible. So these near-death experiences, well, I believe fully honest and truthful, and I think the people are sharing honest experiences, but they might be like a propaganda tool by the white light, set up to come back, talk all about it, talk how wonderful it is. And of course, the other thing that's so strange is the people who do have a near-death experience like that, they tend to come back better people. They tend to transform. They become more loving, they're more kind, they often help others, some become healers. So it's like, this sounds great. How could we possibly not think, how could we think this is bad when we see the results of the people who've gone through it? And again, we have to step back and say, but okay, what's the real motive of everything going on with our entire reality? We can't project what we want reality to be. We have to first break it down and say what actually is reality truthfully. Then we can make decisions on how reality is or is not set up.
Mhm. Okay, let's talk about that for a minute. If we are really in a simulation, is it possible that that simulation is being run by an AI?
Exactly.
Okay.
In fact, I would call the demiurge, the original creator of this place, the original AI. And then what the Gnostics called archons, sometimes then referred to as demons or all sorts of things, are just initial programs made by the AI to run certain. I mean, you have to consider that if we're using this reality as in computer terms, it's far more vast, far more complex than a standard video game that appears on someone's screen in their computer. This is vast beyond comprehension. And so there's some interesting things about a simulation. So one was, how can you tell you're in a simulation? Well, one suggestion was look into your past, look into history. Because if someone's building a simulation, like if you or I were going to build a simulation today for people, we would put our focus on the beginning of the simulation and going to the future, because that's how the simulation is going to run. We're not going to put much focus on the past. We're going to have just enough to get the simulation running. So this person suggested if you can look into the past and have all sorts of holes, all sorts of things that don't make any sense, all sorts of things you can't explain, that's a high likelihood that you are living in a simulation. So that's a very interesting concept right away. The second is that a simulation, if it's computer oriented, needs a tremendous amount of power. And if something is this vast, universes upon universes, think of the power source that this thing needs to generate. It's sick but ingenious if the AI originator decides, let's get the video game characters who are going to be in the game become the power source to run the game further. It's sick and ingenious, but I think that's what's being done. Thus, we can then start to see, okay, we can take what's happening in our world, the AI sort of takeover of this reality, and then we extrapolate it like in bigger terms, say, oh, this is how the whole thing is running, that we're seeing again this hermetic as above, so below, microcosm and the macrocosm, that we can use our reality as it's being, and especially now, we can use the way the reality is now and extrapolate that to think, this is actually how my whole reality has been structured. And things will start to make sense, I think, if you can start to see that they are both one and the same.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So simulation, it has this, taste of not being real. But what we are experiencing here feels very solid, very real. Yeah, you cut yourself, you bleed, you can end up in a horrible car crash, you can become a billionaire. I mean, it's really vast what you can experience here. And all these experiences happen at the same time. The greatest horror and the greatest bliss.
Yeah, sure.
So, um, is that the reason why it is so hard for us to see that it might be a simulation? Because it's really solid here. Although I know, this table where my laptop is standing on, if I take a certain microscope, then I will end up in a space where there is more space between the elements that make up this table than there is material. I know that. And yet, here in this realm, it is very solid, and it is good that is solid, because otherwise I couldn't place anything on it.
Yeah, as long as somebody is still, in this sort of place like that, where it's the idea of reality is a thought, it
Mm-hmm.
can't be seen through. So, like I say, I spent about 6 to 8 years testing reality. I put in about 14 hours a day of extreme practice. Um, and those practices, be they from recapitulation to not doing exercises, to dreaming exercises, to gazing exercises, to, but I was putting in 14 hours a day. It got to the point where I had to put my hands on a chair when I sat down, or I wasn't sure the chair was still going to be there when I sat on it. Walls were no longer solid. Um, I could see outside through walls. People would appear and disappear. So I began to see. I remember one of the first ones I had during with the experiences is all of a sudden I was walking near a river, and again in a very deep, clear state, and all of a sudden the ground started flowing and the river became still. And all of these things, that's when I began to like now the idea of a book, oh, the world is an illusion, the world isn't a dream. Now I understood it because I was experiencing it. It was real when I placed my attention on it. Hence the point, like I've had to put my hands on the chair to sit on it. So in a sense, I was placing my attention on the object, and by placing my attention on the object, I was solidifying it. But as soon as I took my attention away from, and that's all I mean, people wouldn't believe, but if you look in your room right now, every object that's in the room on one level or another, you are sending out like a piece of projection in order to make it manifest in this reality. It's not that you're creating it, but you're switching certain things on and certain things off is the best way of describing it through your attention. And when you learn how to either focus your attention more, you can alter what objects are or not in your world, or if you switch it all off, objects might just disappear. So once you have an experiences like that, then I begin to understand what these ancient and various mystics are talking about, that, oh yeah, it's not real, but I'm having the experience of realness. And yeah, if I don't know, if I don't know that the table's going to be here when I put my drink on it, that becomes very impractical. It becomes, and it actually can turn you kind of nuts. Like it's I think what happens to a lot of not a lot, but some of the people who we see walking around on the street with a shopping cart and muttering to themselves, or have been placed in mental hospitals. I think for a lot of them, they've crossed these barriers and they've literally broken down the bounds of reality in actually a very positive way. They had a very positive experience in that they saw the non-reality of reality. The problem is they had no grounding when they came back to understand the experience. They had nobody around them that could say, actually, that wasn't crazy. What you had was this, it was an experience mystics have had for thousands of years. You need to go to like a monastery for a month or two now and just you need to sit peacefully and begin to understand your experience. And then I think a lot of them could have been very well integrated into their experience with this reality. But if you don't have that connection point of someone there, or pieces of information to help you, it's very easy then for the mind to just spin yourself out of control. And I think that's what happened to a lot of people. So I wouldn't be surprised that with the right amount of information at the right time, a lot of people that are diagnosed as crazy could actually become quite sane, actually.
Yeah. What you described it reminded me of drug-induced experiences like LSD, mescaline, and what have you. So,
Mhm.
but from what I'm hearing, you didn't use drugs. So can you elaborate a little bit how you accomplished that to have a totally, what was one of the exercises that you did?
Yeah, I was very clear that even though I knew drugs could open doorways to other realms, I knew there's a dangerous element to them because the drug is in control of the experience, not you. And so, thankfully, the people who I met very early on instructed me that you want to learn how to do this yourself so that you're always in control of the experience. One of them, for example, was, and like I say, I was doing 14 hours a day, but one of them was gazing, which
Mhm.
was just staring at an object. And if anyone's going to attempt this, always start with a plant first. Don't go into major difficult things. Just start with a very simple plant and stare at it for an hour. Um, that practice, you'll begin to start noticing that the plant will probably change. It will alter. I mean, I had tons of experience just sitting with plants of seeing that, oh yeah, it's not really a plant like I think it is, at all of these levels of layer. And then I began working with trees, and then I began working with other things. I began expanding after I got better and better at it. But that was one of the practices that was very, very valuable, which was because if you just try to sit and turn your mind off, like it's the standard meditation, I'm just going to make my mind quiet. Generally, that's being done so that you can feel better. Someone meditates because they feel stressed, they feel unhappy, and so the whole goal is, I just want to feel better. And that's the spiritual path for most everybody. They just want to feel better. They feel bad, they've had trauma, and they want to feel better. As opposed to, I want to know what this really is. I want to know what this reality is. I want to know what birth is. I want to know what death is. I want these answers. I don't want to leave this place without knowing everything in its totality. And if that becomes your answer beyond feeling good, then you have to do things on a very different level. It might look similar, but they're completely different intentions of what you're doing, and the work is completely different. And as long as someone is focused on only feeling better, they will never find the truth, because as soon as they get to a place where they feel better, they will always stop. And that's 98% of the community out there. And again, there's nothing wrong with but it's just important to know what's the real purpose of what you're doing. If your real purpose is I need to feel better, then that's great. And there's lots of things you can do, and that should be your focus. But don't pretend you're going to get ultimate answers, or you're going to exit the cave, or you're going to leave the matrix. That's just not going to happen. Exiting the cave or exiting the matrix, it's going to take a lifetime of work. And you have to decide that that's what you would want over and above other things. Like you say, in a giant simulation of possibility, there's lots of things to want here. And again, on the other side of this, then I'll shut up and let you talk, is generally, if somebody hasn't gone through a tremendous amount of trauma in their life, they're not going to be able to understand what I'm saying. Because there are people out there who've had wonderful parents and they've treated them really well. They've generally been well liked at school. They've had doors open for them. They've had a decent job. They got married. Their kids are fine. You know, their wife or husband isn't an idiot, and like their life is okay. And so when they listen to someone like me saying this is a suffering pit of hell, or you know, this is a this is a giant garbage truck fire and that's all it's ever been, they think, well, you're the insane one. Life, it can be great. And theoretically it can. The problem is that's for such a very small minority of people here. The majority are suffering intensely. I mean, all we have to do is go through India, go through Africa, go through parts of U.S. cities, and just see the level of suffering and difficulty and pain that the world is in. And for me, if this really was a place made by a loving God who cares about us, the world wouldn't be anything like this. The world would be the world would be a completely different interactive realm. We wouldn't have to eat other creatures just to survive. Every creature out there wouldn't be constantly in anxiety of what's going to eat me in the next 5 minutes. We would live in a different realm. So the fact that we have to take all of it, not just human experience, but the experience of nature, the experience of everything. And while beautiful, and at times wonderful, and at times very peaceful, and I can enjoy it just like everyone else, I can enjoy this realm. I also don't get fooled, though. I don't get fooled that the really nice, beautiful stuff uh, doesn't hide the real nasty stuff that's going on that generally people don't want to acknowledge is happening.
Yeah. Don't worry about talking a little bit longer. I have one interview a couple of years ago with Sevan Boma, and actually I only did the introduction and goodbye. That was the only thing I ever said. But I realized he was on a roll, and I just let him roll.
Yeah, yeah. But I like these to be conversations. I like
Yeah,
the person
yeah.
I'm with, and we can share and talk about things. So that's why I try to always remind myself, stop talking now. Let the other person speak and share some things. And yeah, so I just
Yeah.
reminding myself and you.
So okay. Um, so I guess within this simulation, the death experience is simulated as well. Yeah. Yeah. I thought
Exactly.
so.
Right. Because of course, if you are, see, this was, and it was the hard part for me to get to, right? Like I talked about, was that I could see how reality is a simulation. I could see how all this is an AI experience, but me, I'm real, right? What happens to me is important. This is simulation, but I'm important. So as soon as oh, what, I'm a simulated character too. Now there is something real in my own death experience when I had mine, and literally everything I thought of myself, be it thoughts, feelings, emotions, memories, wants, fears, hopes, when they all just left, they literally just fell off. All that was left was like a witnessing awareness, but not a norm. You know, we do reach this witnessing awareness where we can witness ourselves think. You know, it's a very huge step in the process, the type of self-awareness where we're not our thoughts. We are seeing that we are the experiencer, a thing that can see the thought, Well, in my death experience, I was now at a place where I could see the thing that was seeing the thought. So it was like even another step beyond that. And I was starting to realize that we've got so many layers going backward of what we are. And all those other layers are just, they're just like functional masks that are being worn by this true awareness um, in the midst of this kind of experience. And so, yes, so the death of this particular thing will be it will be the equivalent of a simulated experience. It will seem very real to that which is experiencing it, i.e., the me thing here, but that doesn't mean it's real. It's still another part of the simulation. And just like when the near death experience, or in this case, the death experience will begin, that will, in a sense, also be a simulated experience. And that's also an important part of the listening to so many of these non-standard near-death experiences is so many of them of the non-standard ones talk about, yeah, there was grandma, there was Jesus, there was my parents, but they realized soon enough that's really not their parents, that's really not Jesus. And the face would go away and there would be some sort of demonic or some sort of evil being that was pretending to be this particular person. And so they realized that it was all something being structured just for them, that the entire experience they were going through was, in a sense, you might say, scanned, and they were scanned and read. And then they knew, this is the experience we're going to build for them to get us to do what these beings wanted them to do. And as we begin to, if we can begin to recognize that that's a highly likely part of what's going on, and others, most people don't recognize how manipulated our reality is here. We think we are in control of everything. We think we're making all of our choices. We're running stuff. And if a coincidence does happen, oh, that's good. That's my power animal or my angel helping me out in a situation. We would never think like, hey, demonic beings are screwing with our reality to get us to do what they want us to do, just like in the movie The Adjustment Bureau. The Adjustment Bureau, from that aspect, is an incredible movie for detailing how manipulated we are on a constant basis. And if we're being, it makes sense. If we're being manipulated here, we're sure going to be manipulated in the after death realm.
Mm. That is a little bit sobering. Yeah, not especially
Yeah.
for me, but so is there any part of us that is real, that is not simulated?
Yes. That would be what the ancients called a divine spark.
Mm.
So I guess I don't want to call it, it's because it's not energy either. What we think of as energy, that's part of the simulation too. So it's something that's not even energy, and it's be like a pure consciousness, I guess is the best way of describing it. And it's the thing that's not from here. It's the thing that was brought into the simulation. And then you might say we're kind of like, the best way to describe it, we're being held hostage is the best way to describe it.
Mhm.
Um, you can leave the matrix. It's and this information I think is so important now because I see our simulation is ending. The one we've been in probably not that long, maybe 500, 1,000 years. I'm not sure how long the simulation has been running. Not incredibly long, but it's ending. That's what's going on right now. The new one is being built. It's not fully ready yet. So we're in this gap period. We're not fully in the old one anymore, but we're not in the new one anymore either. And in this middle period, in a sense, there's also means a door is open. We're not as hooked to the simulation right now because it's changing. And then they're going to try to change us, this thing, to get ready for the new simulation. So because that door is open, the opportunity to, I call it, return home is as great as it's been in thousands of years, perhaps. And I think that's part of what a lot of this insanity that's been going on in the last few years and will continue to go on is as a giant distraction to keep people focused out there on what's going on rather than saying, wait a minute, why is all this going on? What is it hiding? What is the thing that it's trying to cover? Go find the thing that it's covering, which would be the doorway, and go through that. And I think there's a great possibility for a lot of divine sparks to return home. And
Mm.
now is the greatest I think the opportunity for that is outstanding now.
But that divine spark would not originate with the demiurge. So
Yeah.
how does that happen? That I am here in a simulation, and yet I have
Mhm.
the divine spark from the original creator, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. Yeah, again, I don't know for sure. I can only
Okay.
go by what the various my own experiences and trying to understand these texts. They kind of two different, there's two sort of generally different stories. They do, whether it be Gnostic or Cathar, for example, the ancient Egyptian stories are a little bit different from that. They're a little hard to explain in just a few words, but generally, in those other stories, there was one particular goddess known as Sophia, who was one of the last creations of the giant eons of the initial created beings. In some cases, Sophia was supposed to have the being we know as Jesus as a counterpart. Others that
A
didn't have that, but
consort.
Sophia did, yeah. But Sophia decided to create on her own without this male female interaction, which would create a completed being. And so, because she wanted to create on her own, she created this mistake. I think it's how it's best way to describe, which became the demiurge, which is a word for craftsman, maker, and that's the demiurge who tried to create a reality again on its own. It would be like then Sophia created a lifeless creation, which is a perfect example of AI, perfect example of a computer intelligence. Now, depending on the story, some say that once this demiurge had made its creations, they didn't live, so needed this divine spark as a power source to make the creations live. So one version says the demiurge snuck into this or other realm and promised the divine sparks all sorts of temptations that they would come in and experience and empower the reality. That's one theory. The other theory, which I think is a little more plausible, is that the demiurge came and asked for help. And at this point, the demiurge may not have been fully insane, that the demiurge was, you know, an idiot, you might say, an AI non-functioning idiot, but not, not evil. And so a number of divine sparks said, okay, we'll come and help you out. And at some time, divine sparks could come in and come out of this reality that the door wasn't closed. It was, we could come in for a while, then go out, help for a while, go out. So the story goes is that it's because the demiurge is creating in a realm that was sick already, because it wasn't a truthful creation. The demiurge, in a sense, got a virus. The demiurge got sick. And once the demiurge got sick, the demiurge decided to not let the divine sparks in and out anymore and shut the door, in a sense, to hostage them into their creation. I think that's a very interesting way of looking at it, because then it's sort of, we can sense this underlying concurrent to anybody who is relatively conscious, that we have just a general desire to help. If somebody's walking down the street and they've got a problem, I'm like, do you need any help? If someone, can I help you with something? That's just natural. A human being who is not overly
Although
whacked
that
out or
is
psychopathic,
fading big time.
it's fading. Oh gosh, we can talk about how many real humans are here or not in this realm, because I don't think there's many anyway.
Mm,
But of those of us that are true humans, that's general. That's general. You'll
yes.
find that anywhere. It's just like, can you help me? Yeah, I can help you out. And so to me, that makes sense that our initial urge as a divine spark to come in here was to help power a creation that was not doing well, with the hope that it would improve and that it could become a decent creation. And that sort of is still mirrored in our existence. So what we have then the demiurge takes this divine spark, and in order to entrap us, it needs to drop us deeper and deeper in the quicksand. That's a way of describing it, going deeper and deeper in quicksand. So giving another body, an astral body, and a mental body, an etheric body, and finally a physical body. That each of these bodies are dropping us deeper and deeper and deeper. So if you can think of it as what is true, your divine spark, this thing has just been layered by all of these, another layer of like armor, like another suit of armor that's been placed on it and just sinking deeper and deeper and deeper in the quicksand. Hence, part of the work, which still exists in some of these traditions of value, is in a sense removing this armor, removing these false layers of things that we believed ourselves to be in order to eventually get to the last layer, which would be the soul. And what's interesting is the soul is not really us either. The soul is I think the divine spark combined with the energy of the demiurge to create the first body. But the soul is the place where we could split off the last piece that's false and be left with just the divine spark. And once we were at just divine spark, we have to remember that then we're greater than even the demiurge. We're greater than at our core. This is one of the things I think is so important about when my message and why I say it's not negative, even though people say it's really negative. It's like, but you, what you are as a divine spark, is greater than this whole reality. There's nothing in this reality that's greater than you. There's nothing in this reality that's more power. Even the demiurge, nothing has more power than the true us. The problem is almost nobody is able to reach the true power because you have to go through all of these layers of false and drop them in order to be left with the only thing that's not false. And that's a very challenging journey given for the multitude of lifetimes that we have lived on various different levels and various different planes and various different existences, which have put another package of false on top of what we are.
Mhm. So between the real spark, the soul that is also a part of the construct, where do you see spirit located?
Well, I would think there's a tough question because some of what we would call, I think what we would call spirit is a guiding force from, you might say, outside of the matrix, outside of the simulation, that's trying to provide some things like David and Jennifer in Pleasantville, or Sylvia in the Truman Show, which are things that enter into the reality, can't can't interact directly, but they can leave messages or information or pointers. That's one part of it. The other part, though, of spirit, though, is what you might call a false tricking mechanism made by the demiurge and the archons in order to do just like the Adjustment Bureau and navigate people back onto a life path that suits the system, won't suit us, but looks nice while we're going through it. Um, it's very weird because people like to talk, I have free will. I have free will. I can do anything. Well, actually, no, you can't. Like, I can't become the quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys tomorrow. Like, I could do whatever. I could have the greatest affirmations in the world. I could start working out constantly. It's not going to happen. But there are thousands of potential options that could happen tomorrow. So this would make sense that if we're dealing with a computer simulation, a simulation is not going to make a billion options for every creature that's in it. The amount of space that would require is massive. So instead, we have limited numbers, a few thousand, and there's many things that are similar to all other people. So what we've got is a free will in a sense of choices of say a few thousand pathways we can walk, which seems potentially endless because to our little mind, even that is a massive possibility. But we don't realize that, like you say, you've got this element of one side of spirit, which is trying to get us out of this whole thing. And you've got another side of the spirit saying, I want you to walk down road number 1840. That's the pathway I want you to walk on in this life. And we're gonna manipulate you in various ways to choose that pathway. So when we start stepping back and we start asking, like this is a fun thing for people to do, and I did this a lot during my recapitulation, which is a life review, is to ask yourself, when we've come to a point where we've made a big decision in our life, how did we really make that decision? Like, how exactly, am I going to live here? Am I going to move to this city? So there's usually a little story in there. There's something that happened, and we always like to say that it was something positive, making us that choice. But so many of our decisions don't really work out for us. We try to pretend like they do. Oh yeah, and then it led me to this. That was a problem. But then but this happened. So it justifies all the other crap. This thing. But if we step back honestly and start fresh and just say, okay, what was going on when I was making that decision between living here or living there? And if I was being, we'll call it influenced, can I see if the influence was actually positive, something that was caring about me, or was it seeming to be positive, but was just trying to draw me into a choice that actually wasn't going to be the best for my totality? Like, The stuff I'm talking about now, exit the cave material, depth about archons and demiurge, and I was working on this 20 years ago. I was building this stuff into a book 20 years ago, and then I had my death experience, which took me off in a completely different direction for a while into a more a more standard spiritual presentation of consciousness and unity and those kinds of ideas, which is not bad, is not wrong. It's part of the pathway. But I realized something that I always just said, it's got to be good. It's got to be 100% good. I never thought for a long time, could even the death experience I was having was I being manipulated by beings to keep me away from certain subjects that it didn't want me talking about? And when I came back to finally writing this book, Exit the Cave, I had to revisit all of the stuff. Why did I stop writing about this 20 years ago? Why did I stop digging into this? And I said, oh, geez, maybe those things were not as positive as I thought it was. So yeah, it becomes this whole difficult chore of when we say, I'm getting help from the spirit, or the spirit is helping with this or that. It's okay. How do we know what the help is? How do we know how it's helping? Here's a really good one then to ask all of us is, when we pray, how do we know what we're praying to? And how do we know we're not becoming prey by praying?
Mhm.
And so why would we not start learning then to pray to the most powerful thing we know, ourself? Why would we not trust our deepest self and direct our prayers then to that, rather than to something that we don't really know who or what we're praying to and what that energy is happening?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not a prayer. For a long, long time, to me, it feels like energy harvesting on a huge scale.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And honestly, if I am the source of life, the true creator, not this demiurgic entity, what do I need worship for? What can a little carbon entity add to me, take away from me, or even the thought of insulting me? That is so ridiculous. A little carbon entity can do nothing to you. Yeah. But a fake entity that needs a power source. And sometimes, with TV shows, I like the TV show Stargate SG-1. And I don't know if you have seen that, but when the Ori came in, that was the last big enemy that they had to battle. Yeah, it turned out
Yep.
that they actually needed the worship of their followers. Yeah, but they forced them to be followers, otherwise the planet was destroyed. So yeah, and that is a sure sign that it is fake.
Yeah, and of course it always tends to lead to, I have a chapter in my book just about prayer and what it is or what it isn't. And um it tends to be turned into this idea, and I have to be worthy of receiving it. Just like I'm asking dad for the keys to the car, so I have to be a really nice boy or girl today so dad will give me the keys, as opposed to, you know, we obviously are generating parts of this reality. I don't like to say that we are creating the whole reality and you are creating your whole experience, because that's not true. And any hologram has two laser beams. We're just one of the laser beams. There's a laser beam from this reality that we're intermingling with, but we create, in a sense, some of our reality. So then why don't we focus our attention on the laser beam we do have, and focus on that which we are projecting out, and at least something that we feel we can control, and will let reality do what it wants? I mean, we talked about this when we first started this interview, and this, as reality kind of gets more and more insane, and it is. I mean, it's always been insane. It's just showing itself to be just beyond insane now to people. And as people ask, well, what are you doing? My answer is, well, I'm just focusing on staying sane. That's all I have to do. I don't have to fix the reality. I don't have to change the reality. I don't have to make it anything else. I just have to stay sane. But the greatest gift I could ever give to an insane reality is sanity.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what just popped in my head time and again, this song Hotel California. You can check out anytime, but you can never leave.
It's all about the reincarnation trap, right?
Yeah.
You know, Hotel California is because it's considered a place of fun. It's considered a place of temptation. It's considered a place. So, yeah, and if you go through the entire song, you will see that there's references to the white light. There's references to various beings that are controlling things. Yeah, but that's the point. You can check out anytime you like. Meaning, if you want to kill yourself, go ahead, but you're not getting out of here because
Mm,
you have not understood. So that's one of people come up with to me quite often. Well, thankfully not so much anymore because I say it now in the interviews, but they would well, why don't I just kill myself and get out of here if it's so bad? And I'm like, well, you can do that. All you're ending is the experience of your physical being in this realm. You're not going to end the suffering train because all that's going to happen is you're going to get recycled into a new body and the next one might be worse. So even though the things might be difficult now, and why not use the time we have available to understand our situation as best we can and to prepare ourselves as best we can for whatever the experience might be after our death so that we can go into it feeling extremely confident. And my suggestion is always now to people when they ask, it's like they will then you're saying I shouldn't go to the white light. I'm saying I'm not telling anybody what to do or what not to do. My suggestion is get yourself into a clear state so that you are able, when you're in a non-physical form, to have awareness and have some knowledge of what you're doing, and then take some time. That's the greatest thing you can do for yourself is just not be rushed into making any choice. It's going to be a very confusing environment. It's going to be very hard to understand what's going on. So take your time, explore it, look around, find out what's going on. If the white light truly is the most loving, wonderful thing waiting for you, then it will wait for you. It'll wait 1,000 years until you finally decide, yeah, you know what? You were right. I should have gone to this right away. And they'd be like, great, come to me. That something like that would never force you to make a choice that you have to do this now or you're not going. Anything that tries to force you ever is usually never for your interest.
yeah, exactly. And so some people are very yeah, very excited about going to 5D, as if 5D is the end all be all. And I have to say, oh my goodness, I I'm so not on board, and I don't think that it will solve anything. What is your take on that?
Okay, I'll give you mine in a second, but what's your biggest sort of um what's the thing that for you when that's presented to you that you just reject right away? What's the initial rejection point of the idea? I'm just curious.
It didn't start when I first heard it, it didn't start right away, the rejection. Um,
Right.
but the more I looked at it, and the more I looked also at the possibility of other races here in our galaxy or whatever. And I have to tell you, a lot of shitty races are existing in 5D, 6D, 7D, whatever. Yeah, and so I don't see how that is the big winner in all of this.
Right. Yeah, it got me initially right away, of course, because they tell us, well, we're in 3D now, and then we're going to this wonderful 5D. So my first question was, well, what happened to 4D? Why are we skipping that? And then the second question I started to ask was I started realizing, well, D to me just means depth, deeper, a simulation within a simulation.
Mhm.
So just like that movie, it came out of the German series. What was that? World on a Wire, right?
Yeah.
That became the 13th floor about simulations within simulations. So I think that's really what it is. The new simulation is going to be the 5D. It's going to be a level deeper. Like really, we don't want to go deeper. We want to go back to 1D at least. We want to go back to at least oneness where we're in that, we don't so to me, 5D is deeper in the simulation. And they're going to have, I think, various ways of tricking people into the simulation. When the time comes, some will go because they're scared and they're saying, you'll be safe here. Oh, you'll have what you need. Others will be told, this is the 5D you've been waiting for. This is this wonderful higher frequency of consciousness. And a number of people have been prepared for it. So they're just going to go ahead, which for a while they'll probably experience. They will probably experience a very wonderful, nice reality. But yeah, once you begin to see that it's just another simulation in a simulation, and no simulation is built for the beings that are in it, it's built for the system, then it doesn't matter how nice it is at the beginning. It's going to be, and I think it's going to be an even more difficult prison-like world to get out of. Yeah, for sure. Let's just say I'm done with this reality and all other realities, all other simulations. I'm never coming back into this thing whatsoever. Everyone else is free to make your own choice, but I'm done. I'm going home. I'm finished with this whole thing. And and everything I'm doing is in the preparation for navigating every one of these possible deception traps. And I don't think you have to wait until you're dead for this to happen. I know we're talking about this, in the after death state and dealing with beings and white lights. And I'm pretty sure it can happen like right now, like today. I think there are cultures, whole cultures, be it the Maya, be it the Anasazi, that in their own way, I think kind of said, we're done with this reality too. And they just left as a group. They left as because archaeologists can't figure out what happened to the Maya, right? They were like cities all over Mexico, and then all of a sudden they're abandoned and they got no bodies. So that's that. I have a second option as to what could have happened there, but that's one of them. But at the very least, I don't see why you would have to wait till after you die to exit the matrix. Of course, you would no longer be in this thing. You wouldn't be in the meat suit anymore if you've left the matrix. Of course, it needs the divine spark kind of to keep this running. But that's okay. Um, but it seems like it's more likely that you can do it after you die. So that's why it's better to prepare at the more likely point of changeover. But there, I've been told about a book. I'll share this with you guys and your viewers here because of the part of Europe you're all in, whose parents came from southeastern Europe, and as we know, there's a large gypsy slash culture of a lot of old esoteric wisdom hidden in various parts of that world. And they claim that the family had a book, a very old handwritten book, and that if you read this book from cover to cover and did every single thing in it exactly as it was described, when you were done, you would disappear. And in my case, that would probably mean you just exited the matrix. You were home. So I don't doubt that this knowledge has been around for a long, long time in this simulation and the simulation before, and it's just been very carefully hidden, very carefully presented. Like even a book like Exit the Cave that I wrote, it's not telling you how to exit the cave. It's telling you that you're in a cave, you're in a matrix, you're in a simulation, and maybe to understand where, how, and where we are so that we can each individually find the doorway out. But for sure, there have been instances of this has been laid out, but it's been laid out very, very carefully, very, very secretively, and very, very quietly behind the scenes so that the system doesn't know, hey, a whole bunch of people are getting out of here.
So, does this simulation extend into the entire galaxy, or is it just Earth, or are we in a location of the multiverse where everything is inverted and upside down? And so is it a local phenomena here on Earth, or does it extend?
My guess is it's one of many. And again, the great question, is this a simulation, which means it's an exact replica of something else, or is it what's it called, a simulacrum, right? Which is a word that means it's kind of based on something, but the original doesn't fully exist. Hard to know which we've got, but the Gnostics were very clear. They called this a copy. That was the word they used. This reality is a copy. So it means there's something that it's based on anyway. I think there's multiple of these things. I don't know about you, but I've had my own experiences of different lives as me. So I've experienced different complete lives as me, whether those are parallel lives that are happening simultaneously, whether they're lives that are happening in a type of time loop. I don't know, because the time loop is another thing that I'm sure plays into this reality, some kind of looping experience over and over again. So I think there's multiple simulations in a much more bigger sort of giant simulation, of which you've got various material world simulations, and they link to etheric simulations, and they link to astral world elements, and then they link to, yeah. So it's all of these layers upon layers upon layers of parts of the simulation. And that's why it's so hard to figure out, because even if someone could figure out the material world part of the simulation, like even if someone unlocked all of this kind of and figured out, I can see how this is running, I see how this is working, but if they don't see all the other layers that are part of it, all of a sudden they die, and then now they're in the astral realm. Like, what the hell is this? I
Hmm.
got that material world figured out. What is this? And so that's part of why it's so challenging, is because there's so many layers, there's so many pieces to what it is. I think the positive part of it, though, is just once you can recognize, but it's all false. That doesn't necessarily mean it's evil. It just means it's false. And
Artificial.
all you're looking for was not false. It's one of the greatest things I got from a teacher, Richard Rose, who died like 2005, I think. But he said he was very clear. Don't go looking for truth, because you don't know what it is. You have a hope. You wish truth is something, but what you can do is find false. Just look for something false, acknowledge it that's not true, and get rid of it. Find something else, get rid of it, and eventually you'll get to one thing that no matter how hard you try to get rid of it, you can't. Then you know you found the truth. So it's sort of like the backwards opposite of how people usually go about truth seeking. And finding false is something everybody can do. And I think that's the whole trick of this. And it's kind of what I've done for 30 years. That's exactly what I've done, is look for something or look for something and try to prove it. I kind of necessarily didn't go looking for false, but I would go, oh, they said this about ancient Egypt. How can I prove that's true? And usually, well, I couldn't. And I took in so many false beliefs, which I'm surprised about 30 years ago when I wrote my book, that I fully believed certain ideas. And now I look back and like, well, how could I even believe that? Because there was nothing that could prove my belief theory at the time. There was only just the hope that it was true. And everything just gets shredded more and more and more as you look at it honestly. And that includes ourself, it includes our world, it includes everything. Um, and yeah, then it's like, well, what's the interesting one thing that will be not false?
Hmm. Yeah. So, um,
Yep.
so, okay, let's talk about, you know what you just described. It makes a lot of sense, but I can also imagine that some people do not like to go down that road simply because they feel, okay, I start, you know, check, 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 I get rid of all the faults. And they might have the impression at the end of that process, I will be standing there holding an empty bag. Yeah, that you drift off into nihilism. Yeah, that there is nothing. And um,
Mhm.
so do you think that is I personally do not think that. I think it is a good method to get rid of nonsense. And so how can we, yeah, not convince people? You usually cannot convince people. They have to convince themselves.
Yep.
But I have an impression there is an element of fear within it. Why people are not doing it, because of the empty bag that I'm holding at the end of the process. You know what I mean?
Yes, I know exactly what you mean, which was a part of my death experience, was the
Okay.
realization of, oh wow, it's not I don't have a real self or a true self or a child self. I have a no self. Right. I have actually all of these selves are just constructs. They're not really what I am. Now, depending on how you go to that, like that's, I mean, if something like this just happens to somebody suddenly and you're not doing work and you're not preparing for it and you don't have somebody you can talk to, that'll drive you, yeah, that'll drive you into potential despair and depression because your whole life is the person's whole life has been built on what's in it for me, you know, how can I get what I want, whatever that I want is, even if it's heavenly bliss and an afterlife, it's for me. I'm going to experience it. There's never, no one's ever doing things for, there's no reason for doing it because there's no one that's going to actually gain from it. So no one's living life like that, or it takes a long time for you to learn to live life like that.
Mm.
But the the interesting thing about it is the closer you get to it, the more truthful it feels. And that's why when somebody's in a deep depression and they're not getting out of bed in the morning and someone says, "Why don't you get out of bed?" There's no reason for me to get out of bed. There's just nothing I have to do in this life.
Mm.
And in that moment, they know it's true. Like it's not like they know actually this is true. There is actually nothing I have to do in this life. But again, it's still being seen only from an egoic character's viewpoint. So it's true and it's false at the same time. So the challenging aspect of that is the problem would be is if somebody is looking to find a self at the end of the truth-seeking path, then they'll probably be disappointed. If they are looking only for, let's call it something different, if they're looking for totality, or if they're looking for honesty, or if they're looking for what is complete, if you use words like that instead of in the seeking, then you can even hit a point of this sort of nothingness and say, but maybe the nothingness isn't the end. Because that's another one of the tricks that nothingness plays on you is that there's a big talk is the void. People, especially who have near-death experiences, talk about going to a void. I've gone to a void. People who meditate go to a void. And it seems like what can be beyond a void? How can the void be, anything beyond a void? It's nothing. But the problem they're missing is, but there's a thing here experiencing the nothing. That means it's not nothing. There's still duality. It's still two, an experiencer and that which you are experiencing. And what is true must be only one. 1D. It cannot be two. So even the void, even this nothing, bizarrely is still in the matrix. And it's one of the last, there's two last traps in the matrix. I think one is the void nothingness, and the other is a paradise-like realm, nirvana. In the nothingness, if someone is there, they will eventually get frightened because of the potentially of the experience of nothing. Someone who's in heaven will eventually get bored because there will be no experiences other than a very limited number that keep happening to them. This is similar to a Twilight Zone episode where a person dies who was like a gambler, a crook, a thief, and they get put into a equivalent of Las Vegas. Every time he throws the dice, he wins. Every time he plays cards, he wins. Every girl he asks out goes home with him, and he finally goes and tells God, you know what? Can you just have me lose once in a while? Because actually, better yet, why don't you just send me to hell for like a week so that I can practice losing and feel that experience again? And finally, God's this experience. Well, where do you think you are? You know, this
What
whole
do you
yeah.
think?
So the whole evenness, everything is happening perfectly for me all the time becomes its own hell, and it's another. So it's so bizarre how these how even pleasure can be built into a type of hell for the person or the character in question. And there's as many people trapped in this realm by pleasure as there are by pain. Pain and trauma and suffering, though, tend to potentially stir somebody. If you're having a happy dream, you don't want to wake up. But if you're having a horrible nightmare, you really, really want to wake up. So, at the very least, pleasure, while nice in this realm, and again, I would prefer a hug than being punched in the face. But I know that pleasure has a limit and could only last a particular amount of time before it will end and pain will take its place. Some kind of suffering will take its place. So I don't get fooled by it. But certainly when someone has gone through trauma, then it offers the possibility of having to step back and say, why is this happening? Why does this kind of suffering take place? Why does this kind of trauma exist? And somebody might say, I'm not really a spiritual seeker. I'm not really hard on. I said, but well, have you gone through a divorce? Have you gone through the death of a child? Have you gone through, and have you really thought about it? And yeah, that I was hard. I took a year. I really thought about me and myself and how I was it. But don't you understand? That is true spiritual work. That is true going inward, which is looking at the way reality is presenting things to you and taking it within and asking, why is things the way they are? Why am I the way I am? Why do I act the way I act? Why do I think the way I think? That is true spiritual work. Again, people like to think it's how long can I sit with my eyes closed and be happy? That's not spiritual work. That's a type of preparation for spiritual work where you can maybe get yourself into a quiet, clear state where then you can ask the questions and then you can look deeply. But it's a warm-up period. People stop. It's same thing as like the dentist chair, or the dentist waiting room. A lot of what people do in practice is just stay in the dentist room. They don't want to go in and start digging through stuff because it's going to be challenging. It's going to be painful. The good news I can tell you, at least from my own experience, is eventually, if you are willing to keep going, there is something on the other side of it. I did a life review. I did a life recapitulation. It took me 4.5 years. It was one of the most hard things I've ever done, partially because of what I had to see about myself and partially because of how boring it was for a long time. And I could have quit a lot, many times, but I saw it through. I finished it. And it wasn't until 2 to 3 weeks after I finally finished it that I realized what had actually happened from it when I finally, oh my God, that's what this thing does. Holy crap. But you could never realize it until you've done the whole thing. And it's a lot of cases of spiritual work, true spiritual work, like I've just described, really going within and looking at yourself is a long process that you sometimes don't realize the value of it until you've completed that part of the process.
Do you think there is an energy grid around the earth that is, yeah, let's say, recapturing souls and recycling them through here, or how does that work?
I mean, it could be many forms, right? There's
Mm,
again, we're in a simulation, so there's so many different ways the simulation could have what you might call different types of nets, some physical, some non-physical. My guess is depending on the type of identity and personality and way people have come to see things, they will run into they will run into the recycling system more the way they would be wanting to see it. So perhaps a more scientific, a more material-based person might see it that way. Somebody who's maybe a more spiritual, dreamlike person, they might see it in a way that's non-real, kind of done with energy. And so I think there's various ways that it can be presented to us, but each one is just it's again, it's just like an overlay. It's just a presentation of the real system going on behind the scenes.
mhm. So okay, now let's go there. I just dropped my body and I realize it, and the light
Okay.
show is going on. And I do not want to go to that light show. When you said just take your time, is it a good idea to just wait a second and look around what other options are there, where I could go?
Yeah, I think the best option is just to be, at least the way I've come to describe it is because one of the things that seems to happen in the after death state, or I think this is where dreaming, like live dreaming work is very important. Lucid dreaming and astral projection is just getting used to how your awareness functions when you're experiencing the world in a non-physical form. And when you're in those states, you kind of notice that what you focus on, what you're attracted to, you kind of automatically move towards. It's almost like you can even float there or just are instantly there. So for me, the best thing would be because the white light seems to be an unbelievably attractive thing. It's like the same way like a bug zapper is. The bug is automatically attracted to the light of the zapping thing. Of course, as soon as the bug gets to the bug zapper, it's killed. Some good metaphor, but it's going to be a really attractive force, especially because it's presented as being love beyond what you can possibly have ever experienced before. And certainly someone is going to be, the soul will be confused, be dealing with trauma. We've just died. Boy, wouldn't that be a nice feeling to, feel welcomed and loved and cared for? So I think the best thing we could just do at least is turn away from it.
Mhm.
Say, okay, it's trying to attract me, so I'm just going to focus on something else at the beginning, and just, it'll probably keep trying to get our attention, but it's going to be like, okay, uh, what else can I put my attention on for a while? And then, like you say, just be able to say, okay, well, what is this realm like? How does this realm operate? Um, who is this thing now that doesn't have a physical body anymore, that has an awareness? Who and what is this thing that's having these experiences? And just try to take some time to just get a lay of the land, you might say. Try to just figure out, where are we? What's going on? How is this happening? And I think the other thing would be, don't trust anyone or anything giving you information.
Yeah.
My guide has just appeared, or, this wonderful person has come to explain everything to me. That would be another thing. Like, yeah, get away
Mm.
from me. Just
Yeah.
get the hell away from me. Because I don't know who you are, and I know all of these beings like to play as many tricks and deceptions as possible. Not interested. So I think the best option is, don't be attracted to anything. So therefore, you won't be pulled towards it. Don't listen or trust anything outside of yourself. And this is beginning this. I think that's a good part of what we need to do in this life, is just learn to practice, um, getting comfortable with um, our own authority, being able to get comfortable saying yes and no to various things that we want to say yes or no to, and being okay that people won't like our answers necessarily. Do you want to come to my party? No, I really don't, actually. I just want to stay home Saturday, and yeah, I'm sure it'll be a big party, but I'm sorry, I'm just not interested. And being okay that it's okay to say how you really feel. It's okay to make your own choices, because once we get to that place, once we get to this after death state, the game is going to rise many levels. And if we don't know how to obtain our authority here, we're not going to have a chance of obtaining our own authority there. So
Yeah.
you can almost look at your life experience in a physical body. You can then look at it as an opportunity to practice how you need to prepare yourself for, when you're in that state, in that place you just described. You're going to be at least operating in a place where you are fully operating in your own authority.
Mm. And I think what would also be helpful is to get rid of knee-jerk reactions.
Right.
Yeah, because then you will definitely be
Of course.
drawn into something that you might think, oh yeah, because of course we associate light with positive things. Yeah, and that
Right.
is how we are conditioned. We are more afraid of the dark, and but interestingly enough, darkness is also fertility. Yeah, the seed grows in the dark,
Right.
and yeah,
Yeah, and you can never experience light if you're not comfortable in the darkness. So it's
mm,
very important to be comfortable in darkness before you can even truly experience light. And like you say, knee-jerk reactions are generally, there's an emotion involved. The
mm,
reason the knee-jerk reaction is because something has emotionally caused us to react in a particular way, as opposed to this containing of the emotion. Okay, the emotion has come, it's information, that's all it is. I don't have to do anything with it. The information can come, the emotion can go, and now I can sit clearly in where I am and make the decision that I want to make. So yes, all of these little ways of changing our behavior, the way we normally operate, I think are all possible preparations for, yeah, the great transformative experience. And you talked about the Egyptian Book of the Dead at the beginning. The ancient Egyptians had a number of different funerary texts, from the pyramid text to the Book of What is in the Duat to Book of Caverns, Book of Gates. There's a number of different texts, and each one gives slightly different information on the after death state. And of course, they're very challenging to go through, because we have such a poor translation of hieroglyphics into our current language. There's so many layers to the ancient hieroglyphic language. Um, I know some have gone. I went through the book of the Tibetan Book of the Dead recently,
Mhm.
really looking forward to reading it, and came away quite disappointed, actually. Simply because I don't know when's the last time you read it, but like the first 6 or 7 chapters was all about light. Oh, you're going to come to a red light, but don't go to the red light, go to the yellow light. But then you come to a yellow light and you want to go to a white light. No, but then the white light's no good. And I'm like, what is this? And if this is really the structure that it's going to be in the afterlife, my first response would just be, get rid of all the fucking lights. I'm just not interested. Just be gone with all of them. This is obviously even stupider than I ever thought. And I'm just going home. I'm just leaving. So it's like it almost seems like just like it was with Plato's Cave when I talked about when I wrote the book, when I went through Plato's Cave and I thought this is supposed to be the great allegory, right? It's the basis of Dark City and the Matrix and the Truman Show and it's all updates of Plato's Cave. When I reread it and I realized actually this story is missing everything that's important. It's just telling you things that are simplistic, but doesn't actually get to the foundation. It doesn't ask you questions like who are the prisoners in the cave? Why are they prisoners? What did they become prisoners from? Why are they in a cave and not of a prisoner of war camp? Why are whoever these beings are that are making these shadow shows on the wall, why are they spending all this time fooling a lot of prisoners? The absolute keys that would be explaining the allegory are not there. And as I began using that and going through a lot of these other old ancient texts, I'm realizing it's also missing all of these important foundational messages. Either they were complete at one time and they were edited and key stuff was taken out, or if this is how they were originally, then they were actually part of the deception right from the beginning. So
Mm.
again, we're back to who can we trust? Well, just ourselves.
I agree. I practiced Tibetan Buddhism for a couple of years and then I dropped it all. And at the end of the day, I'm not saying I didn't learn anything useful. Of course I did. But at the end of the day, it's just still part of the simulation. And there are some helpful things
Right.
within it, yeah, that can help you navigating this 3D
Yep.
realm. And what I also liked was the POVA initiation, that is of the practice of conscious dying. Yeah, that you shoot out your consciousness here. You do not exit here, eyes, and
Right. Right.
please do not exit down there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
the anus is not the way to go. So the best would be here, and
Right.
it's a long thing. It takes 3 days, and you also have a physical mark. You can actually see that on
Right.
YouTube, where they do Hova sessions in Tibet,
Oh yeah.
and
Yeah.
then you can see how the teacher is checking the
Mm.
hole that you have here in your head.
Right.
So yeah, that was useful. But other than that, um, no, it just keeps you in the matrix.
Right. I think that's a valuable point for everybody to, because that's kind of where I've come to, is these other sources, these other ancient things have pieces of information. There's clues that are in them that can be taken out and used. The problem is if we then take that this one particular teaching or doctrine has all the answers and we need to focus on it singularly, that it will do the job. And like, well, no, like anything, it's been reworked, like you say, into the matrix. I've
Yeah.
realized that even if there was a person alive at one time who did have total knowledge and was sharing that knowledge, it only takes 10 or 15 years for all of the remaining students to start changing what was said, altering what was said, saying things in a way that's going to benefit them, just totally mistaken with what is being said. And within 20 years, it's completely mixed up and it's not the same anymore at all. And it becomes, like you say, now part of the trapping mechanism as opposed to the part of the original going out. And we're back to who was that guy, Julian James, right, who wrote Path of Masters, and he was very clear: if you want a master, make sure it's a living one, because the dead ones are no good to you. You know, they
Mm.
lived, they died, they're gone, and so find somebody who at least is alive, who you can talk to, who you can converse to, who you can, and again, that's part of the people don't like to hear that. They like to make things as simple as possible for themselves rather than have to, oh, I got to do all that work. Well, but a few will do it.
Yeah. So I will wrap this up now, and I thank you so much for coming. I found
Yeah,
the conversation really inspiring, and I hope you come back because I have a lot of questions still on my
sure.
book. And
Mhm.
yeah, maybe we can talk another time, and you're always welcome here.
Thanks. Well, like we said earlier, you live, and I'm sure a lot of your followers live in a part of the world right now that is in extreme turmoil.
Mm,
The insanity of this reality is right on your doorstep. And that means life is not easy, but it means, can you use the challenge, like I said before, can you use the difficulty that's around you to find what's deeper in truth? Can you use that? Because if the chaos is there, it's hiding something. So what is it hiding? And yeah, for those of you who are interested, yeah, you can find me. I've got still got a YouTube channel running, Howdy Mickoski Talks for now. I'm over on Locals as well, where I do most of my talking now, and sharing is on Locals to try to have a better community and better conversation. You can look through a place like Amazon to find the books originally. You don't have to buy them there if you want them. You can buy them from anywhere you want. And Egyptian-wisdom-revealed.com is my website. But soon I've got a new one coming up, so it'll eventually it will just transfer you there. And those are places to look into. And again, as I remind everybody, I'm just sharing information and ideas, thesis, research, experiences. I can't in any way say I'm 100% certain of anything. Things in a week could change if I get new information and new ideas. This is just for information for you to contemplate, to think, to look into your own experiences and come to your own conclusions of yourself and reality. And I'm just sharing some things that sometimes don't often get shared here.
okay. So yeah, that was it, guys. The night flight for today, and with the wonderful Howard Mickoski. And we see you all next time. In the meantime, stay safe and sound out there. Bye bye.